بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصلى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. Okay, so we'll continuing our study of or reading of Allama Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. And basically we covered his discussion of Ouspensky's conception of space and time last time. And basically he started with the notion of space-time in classical physics, and he moved on to, and he saw problems with the conception of space and time in classical physics because it is mechanistic. It doesn't provide any room for creativity, which he is looking for. So the motion, creativity, and time are closely connected in Allama Iqbal. In Einstein, he saw something which goes beyond classical physics, because for him, Einstein basically deconstruct and delegitimizes the classical concept of substance, which was for Allama Iqbal is the foundation of materialism, which is also trying to reject. But he didn't find everything he was looking for in Einstein's conception of space-time, because for him Einstein merges time into space, and which for Allama Iqbal is not a positive move, because if we understand time in the image of space, then we divest time of its creative resourcefulness. So then he looks at Ouspensky's conception of space and time, and he finds something which in Ouspensky which gives him a hope beyond Einstein. So with Einstein, subjective experience or subjective aspect of time was missing as well. And in a way, time cannot be understood or cannot be fully understood without bringing in the subjective element, or at least explaining it. So what was the positive he found in Ouspensky, which goes beyond? Einstein. The positive he did find. So he found in Ouspensky, as we saw yesterday or the last time, that he saw in Ouspensky's conception of time or his definition of time as a distance. Ouspensky defines time as a distance. So that's not a good start because distance is a special concept, but it seemed at least at the start that this use of distance is more of metaphorical. So time as a distance separating events. That was his definition, separating events in order of succession. And binding them. I think last time we didn't emphasize enough the importance of binding them in different wholes. That's important too. So let's look at this definition today. But that will give us an idea of what is attractive in Iqbal, what is attractive in Ouspensky for Iqbal. But then, as we saw, in the end, he finds Ouspensky also lacking in the sense that his conception seems also to reduce time to space, or at least albeit at a higher level. But we will come to that. But let's first see what's the positive in it. The first element of this definition is distance separating events. In order of succession. Now, this in a way captures the sequential nature of time. Sequential nature of time. And by sequential nature of time, what we mean is simply that events occur one after another. So that sequential sequence is unique in time, because unique for time, because space is a distance, time is a distance, and both are distances separating events. But the difference is that time is sequential in nature, so events occur one after another, but in space, in the concept of space, you don't have that sequential element. And you can bring in sequential element in a special discourse only because you're using the concept of time. Okay. So in a way, yeah. So that's one thing. So this is a chronological aspect of time, which is important or essential for understanding cause and effect, for example. And in a way, it is a defining characteristics of time. Because if you define both space and time as distance separating events, then what differentiates time from space is this chronological order, this sequential order. Okay. But the second thing is in this definition was, which we didn't spend much time on here last time, was the binding element of time. That time binds, time binds different events in different wholes. Um, so events in my day, for example. So time has bound those events into one whole because they belong to my day. And this, in a way, introduces a subjective element. In this definition of time, which Allama Iqbal was obviously looking for, the definition of time. Okay, so far it is good. So, or different events in my life spans. So in that way, death is, as Heidegger would say, death is very important for our conception of time, isn't it? So death, in a way, is the end of possibilities within that subjective experience. So binding time in different wholes. So that's as I said, introduces a subjective elements. The time is not just a simple line; it is a line as well, as the first part of definition makes it clear. But more than that, it is a framework that connects events into a meaningful structure or whole. Even if you don't use the word meaningful, uh, you can say connects them into into different into a structure or a whole. That can be, as I said, subjective, related to my life, so a lifespan of a person. But it can also be social, at the social level. So history of a society, for example, or history of civilization, or history of universe, etc. So this aspect, the binding aspect, points to a conception of time which is important for which is important for the perception of and creation of and structuring reality through lens of time, through creating narratives, histories, and causal relationship. So, in a way, it seems to be a very promising start. So, where does things go wrong? And that Alamit Ball comes to at the end part. And the problem comes here when Alamit Ball so Ouspensky's, he says, Ouspensky, elsewhere in the same book, Ouspensky describes our time sense as a misty sense, space sense, and argues that Ouspensky describes our time sense as a misty space sense, and argues on the basis of our psychic constitution that to one, two, or three dimensional beings, the higher dimension must always appear as a succession of time. So from this, what we gather is that in a way, this sense of time is not real. This sense of time is the byproduct of the limitations of our constitution. And because we cannot understand reality at all levels or at once, we always seem to understand the dimension which is beyond our comprehension as time. So, a creature whose sense of space dimension is just one sense or one dimension sees second dimension as time, and a creature with two dimension space perception sees the third dimension as time, and creatures like us who has three dimensional space conception sees the fourth dimension as time. So what looks as creative, as meaningful, is in effect just the byproduct of limitation. And if we could see all the dimensions at once, then everything is spatial. There's no time as such. So at the end, there is no time. If there is no time, time is reduced into space, then everything is as it is. It can't be otherwise. So creativity is gone. That's Allama Iqbal's point. So even though he finds Ouspensky promising at the start, that promise, like Einstein's promise, slowly fades away when we look at the ultimate explanation. So that's what he's saying. Elsewhere in the same book, Ouspensky describes our time sense as a mystery space sense. On the basis of our psychic constitution that to one, two, or three dimensional beings, the higher dimension must always appear as succession in time. This obviously means that what appears to us three-dimensional being as time is in reality an imperfectly sense-based dimension, which in its own nature does not differ from the perfectly sense dimension of Euclidean. In other words, time is not a genuine creative movement, and what we call future events are not fresh happenings, because If everything is spatial, then everything is determined in Alamic Ball's view. But things already given and located in unknown space, which we see that unknown space we experience as time. Yet in his search for a fresh direction other than the three Euclidean dimension, Ouspensky needs a real serial time, that is, a distance separating events in order of thus time, which was needed and consequently viewed as succession for the purposes of one stage of argument is quietly divested at a later stage of its serial character and reduced to what does not differ in anything from the other lines and dimensions. So that's where the whole project falls apart. From a Lamek Ball's perspective, might not fall apart from Ouspensky's perspective. We might not be looking for what a Lamek Ball is looking for. Because of this serial character of time, that Ouspensky was able to regard it as a generally a new direction in space. If this character is in reality an illusion, how can it fulfill Ouspensky's requirement of an original dimension? It may or may not, but the point is it doesn't fulfill a Lamek Ball's conception or Lamek Ball's requirement. Ouspensky believes that consciousness is structured our consciousness is structured in such a way that it can only perceive three spatial dimensions clearly. That's his argument. So any other dimensions which we don't perceive clearly, for example, fourth dimension, we perceive it as time. But in fact, it is just a byproduct of our misty sense. It's not reality. So time is in fact space. If we were fourth dimensional beings, we would experience time as just another dimension of space. That's his argument. The fourth and higher dimensions are beyond our immediate sensory grasp, and so our minds translate them into a form we can understand, and that form is flow of time. But flow of time is actually an illusion which is a byproduct of our limitations. Okay, but that is unacceptable for a Lamek Ball. For him, flow of time. That's why he will ultimately go to Bergson. This suggests that past, present, and future may not be distinct or sequential reality, but rather coexisting part of a larger spatial whole. Yeah, larger spatial whole that we simply cannot perceive all at once. So this view basically challenges conventional view of time as a fundamental, and that's what Lamek Ball is looking for: linear progression, and instead reframes as a byproduct of our perceptual limitation. In Ouspensky's world, all of existence is eternal and simultaneous. All existence is eternal and simultaneous. It doesn't. So everything is written. But for a Lamek Ball, this is the death of creativity. But for Ouspensky, our experience change is success is merely a subjective filter on that underlying reality which is already there. But for a Lamek Ball, reality is being created every time, kun fayakun, as he says. As he says in his poetry, the sound of kun fayakun he can hear. So I think this was a fruitful session in the sense that we have much clearer grasp on Allama Iqbal's attraction to, and then reject his rejection of Ouspensky. Okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وشفينا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين.